uh, you are resolving the education part of.
Hello everyone. We are still waiting for some more people to join. So maybe after 5-10 minutes we will start. Yeah, sorry for a little bit of delay.
Got it. Who am I to design? ठीक है सर ओके ओके अच्छा
Hello, everyone. Um, Sorry for the delay. So, very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to IUDI Global second interaction of the series. Who am I, the designer? In short, WAID. Well, I'm Debain Chatterjee, an urban designer and architect from India, currently working with Albert Speer and Partners in Frankfurt, and I'll be your host today. WAID 2023 consists of a series of short reflection talks that will be delivered by various Indian urban designers working across the globe. We had our first session in March, where our focus was on UD practices in Middle East and Africa. So today is our second session, and our focus will be on Australia and Europe. Our four panelists will be sharing their personal experiences of working in those regions, along with their critical thoughts on how urban design practices are running there, and also how much opportunities we have as Indian urban designers to develop a career in those competitive regions. We will be hosting one more session tentatively in November, where our focus would be to discuss urban designers' scopes in North and South America. So we are hoping all the aspiring urban designers and fresh graduates who are and will be attending these sessions will collectively get a better idea on how to develop urban design career outside India. Now, before starting today's discussion, it is important we talk about IUDI here. And for that, I would like to first invite Professor Arunab Das Gupta, who is the current president of IUDI. He was my professor when I was studying urban design from SPA Delhi back in 2012-2014. Without his continuous support and guidance, it would have been never possible to form this IUDI global group. So thank you, sir, for being here with us today. And it would be great to hear from you about the Institute and its activities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Devan. The fact that you exist even today means that I must have done something good. Otherwise, you would have found your own ways and paths, which I think was extremely relevant. There are also, along with you, many others who have joined in today. Some of them I have probably had a role to play in their lives, but there are many others who have come in from outside IUDI or outside SP urban design, which to me is a great encouragement, because that shows that urban design is spreading. It was spreading anyway, it is spreading even further now. And by spreading, I mean that IUDI itself as an institute, first of all, spread across the country. Today we have about 10 centers or chapters across the country. And you have mentored and you have steered IUDI beyond the boundaries of the country into what we call today as IUDI Global Group. It took us some time, 1.5 decades almost, to be able to recognize that urban design has anyway moved beyond the boundaries of the country itself and has gone abroad. And the fact that you are holding 3 or 4 sessions or wishing to hold 3 or 4 sessions in 1 year across the entire world, right, from north to south and east to west, speaks volumes about the way the discipline is spreading and how quickly it is spreading. I think that is what we all should get enthused about. No matter who we are, wherever we are located, we should understand that this is a profession which has a very recent kind of existence, but it is spreading both nationally and globally at an extremely fast rate. Maybe this is the time. That is what I feel. And this is also the time, therefore, for us to learn from each other. Right? Because you are situated outside the country, some of your colleagues are situated outside the country. They are either in the middle of the world or at the far end of the world. We are able to figure out what urban design means to many of these people who are from the country but who are situated elsewhere. And that to us is a great, great achievement, both achievement as well as thought-provoking kind of a condition, because we all know how bitterly we had to fight to make urban design relevant. So far, urban design has not been really recognized. And today it is getting more and more of that recognition. So one of the ways of getting it recognized also, as you know very well, is not only to spread our wings, but also to become relevant in our own space. So we have been holding, since 2019, we have been holding what we call the National Convention or Conference of Urban Design. This year, we would like to hold it again in the end of September, beginning of October, 29th, 30th, the 2 days, when people outside IUDI will be coming into Panjim and discussing the way in which Indian resilience or resilience of the Indian city can be spearheaded and learned from in terms of an urban design experience. This is what we are going to do in Panjim on the 29th and the 30th, which is essentially a Friday and a Saturday. 1st October, half a day, we would like to spend at least with the IUDI members and people who are well-wishers of IUDI and learn from them what more we should do. 2nd October, as you all know, is already a holiday. So I'm hoping, and we are all hoping, that whoever comes to Goa or in Panjim will make the best use of it. Right? They will not only get enriched intellectually, but they'll also have some more other things to do. And that is why we have chosen this time. It was chosen a little earlier, almost at the end of this month, 29th, 30th and 1st of June and July. But we realized it is just too hot, right? And that very few people will be able to go out of the conference premises. So now we have shifted it to the 29th and 30th of September. We made sure that it is not clashing with the tourism period, which is in January or in December, or especially in winter. But we are hosting the entire conference in Hotel Siddhartha Goa, which is also one great attraction for a lot of us architects to come and start thinking about what we can do as career, as future, as profession, or anything. So I feel that this is how IUDI is shaping up. Devan had taken the mantle of taking IUDI abroad as well as trying to do something outside India. And I think that that is a great, great task. All of you and all of us should chip in, and we should try and find out how can we make this more relevant. So over to you, Devayan. Thank you again for creating this event. I know that this is the second session. I have also realized that it is covering Europe, UK, and I don't know where else, Australia. And that, yeah, the finale is at the end of the year, when USA comes into the picture and America, Canada, North and South America comes into the picture. So I think that the year itself has been very, very productive. We will talk about it much more in Goa. So please be with us, come there, and make sure that our conference becomes relevant. Thank you so much, Devayan. Please carry on. I'll be around.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And we will be sharing more details about the NatCon event soon in our chat box. Again, now moving to today's session. So the next two sessions now will be moderated by two of our talented IUDI global team members, Akanksha and Insia. So I'll first introduce Akanksha, as she will be hosting our first session on Australia. Akanksha is an architect urban designer currently working as an urban designer with CBT in the UAE. She graduated as an architect from College of Architecture, Pune University, and later pursued her master's in urban design from Kamla College, Mumbai University in 2019. Akanksha is highly creative, exceptional at graphics, and is a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. Recipient of prestigious awards and publications in her name, Akanksha is a passionate urban design professional who has extensively been involved in urban projects across India, Africa, and the Middle East. So now for the Australia session, we have two panelists here today. Gunali is our first panelist. She is an urbanist and architect contributing as an urban designer at the City of Greater Yulong. She is passionate about unpacking the intercollaborative aspects of architecture, urban design, and planning. She also has a strong interest in policy-led, socio-economically diverse responses to urban realms, housing, and multi-scalar spaces. Outside practice, Gunali contributes to academia through research and teaching. She contributes as a researcher at the Infer Research Hub and as sessional tutor and guest critic for urban design studios and subjects at her alma mater, University of Melbourne. She is recently appointed as a committee member at the Urban Design Forum Australia. She is also an alumni of JJ School of Architecture in Mumbai, and she has previously completed her architecture training under Bibi Doshi at Sangat, Ahmedabad. Welcome, Gunali. So our second panelist is Amitav, who is the co-founder of Project Vision, a boutique project management company offering management, construction, and architectural services. Project Vision specializes in retail, petrol, industrial, and residential projects. Amitav offers a rare combination of multidisciplinary experience in different aspects of the industry. Prior to starting Project Vision, Amitav worked as an architect specializing in health and retail sectors, as a project manager in commercial projects, as an urban designer for 6 mega projects in Australia and Indonesia, and as a change manager for the process integration of Bovis and Landlease. Thank you, Akanksha, Gunali, and Amitav for agreeing to be part of this event. Looking forward to a great session today. So, Akanksha, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Deban. A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to IUDI's second interaction of the series, Who Am I, the Designer? Well, I'm Akanksha, like Deban mentioned. I am your host for the evening. We're very happy to have with us here today two of our IUDI Global Chapter members from Australia, Amitav Goswami and Gunali Asgaonkar. They'll be sharing their experience of urban design practices in Australia. So without any further delays, let's get our audience to know you better, Gunali and Amitav. So can you both tell us about your journey as an urban designer? Maybe Gunali, if you'd like to start first.
Thanks for the introduction, Debayan and Akanksha. I'll start with acknowledging the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners of the land on which I work and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I do want to acknowledge that Australian land was stolen and wasn't ceded. So I sort of knew that I wanted to be in spatial design since I was a young age, but probably like most urban designers, I didn't know that it was my true calling until I completed the 5-year-long process of architecture studies. So my bachelor's was at JJ School of Architecture. And during my final year thesis, I'd worked on some communal projects which involved this Agaria community and sort of realigned my focus towards why architecture exists. And it was about making it people-centric. And that's how my journey towards urban design, I think, started. And I also did some study in between of my bachelor's and master's, which was a postgraduate diploma in critical theory, aesthetics and practice from Gyan Prava in Mumbai. Next slide, please. Yep, so I'll come back to some of their journey through all the other sort of questions that I get asked. But I'm currently an urban designer at City of Greater Geelong, and also do some sessional tutoring and guest lecturing at Melbourne University. But I do want to lay emphasis on the fact that throughout the time, since I think second year of my bachelor's, I've been working in some way or the other with architecture practices or urban practices. And I think that was a really good sort of immersion into understanding what practical world is and sort of getting more experience about what's actually required from your studies in terms of time management and perspective. Is like you can't be so stuck in your design concept for like a whole semester, because in the real world, it goes much faster. So I did work at Nature Nurture Architects when I was still studying, and in my bachelor's in India, and at MGS Architects and Planners in Australia while doing my master's. And like Akanksha Devan said before, I did intern at Sangat, and I believe that two of the other panelists, the Europe ones, have also worked from there. So I guess we have similar experiences across different timelines. And this is sort of like a Sangat reunion in a way. Next, please. Yep, so I think apart from just work, there's a lot of impact that collaboration brings in. And there's two sorts of collaboration that I've touched on here. One is study and research. So I'm involved in research with the Info Hub, which looks at global South countries. And I feel like that's something that I could contribute to when I'm here in the context of Australia, trying to understand what the world does better. But also to sort of advocate for change and for what organizations are there for urban designers, what opportunities exist. And so I'm a committee member at the Urban Design Forum Australia, and it's a not-for-profit that works towards unpacking urban design what it means, or advocating for good change, as well as creating a network for urban designers, which I think is a similar sort of sentiment that IUDI also has. And apart from that, I'll touch on PI and AI. They're two umbrella institutes or recognition similar to the COA, where it's Planning Institute of Australia or Architects Institute of Australia. And they sort of help with like a touch point on professional development. Next. I'll probably finish with my summarizing, my approach towards design thinking, which is quite multi-scalar, wherein as a designer, I'm always looking at how a particular design operative or thought can impact various aspects or various scales across, cities or even networks or even individual like habitats and environments. And also testing the interdependencies becomes really important. It's almost like a butterfly effect where one small thing could make a big impact, and something happening somewhere else in the world can impact you in a different way in your neighborhood as well.
Yeah.
Who are the participants?
So I'll probably finish with sort of saying that my methodology or understanding of urban design is that it's quite cyclic. So, as a profession, I've observed or felt that we analyze cities through mapping, statistics, observations, and that sort of forms a good set of research tools. And then those sort of inform theory, but the theory can also be, market prevalent conditions, political decisions, maybe even what community needs, what city needs, and that guides design. And then it cyclically feeds back to the city, because the city then adapts the design that, we as urban designers make. Thanks.
Thank you, Gonali. It's very interesting to know about your thoughts and where it has got you today. Amitav, I'm sure yours would be a different story altogether. So we'd like to hear from you too.
Yeah, it's completely different. So architect from SPA, joined urban design purely because I wanted for a personal reason to stay back in the hostel, no other reason. Turned out to be the best course I ever did. I don't know if Katie and they're there. Aruna was one of my seniors. Purely loved it, really loved it. And then I worked there for a while and came to Australia. My projects have been sort of upside down. I've started on biggest projects in my life at my younger age. And then as I grow older, my projects become smaller and smaller. So this is one of my early projects that is on the screen. It's, I've actually forgotten, I think it's 60,000 hectares of land where it's 2 full suburbs have been built. It was a land owned by the army in Australia, and our company's name is Lendlease. They did a joint JV with them. These are some of my drawings. These are actually one of my drawings in there, and which we submitted. It took 5 years for us to rezone this marshland or whatever. It was not marshland, it's just fallow land. So yeah, that's one of my, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Really, now they're full suburbs, and I've actually built a marketplace, a town center, and one of them as a project manager. So that was my earlier work that I did in Australia. And if Divine is kind enough to go to the next one. And so this one is, this is after I quit Lendlease and started on my own as Project Vision. It always had this dream that I want to do something on my own, and I'll become this bigger than Benna. Never made it. So it's, but still happy. So this was my first project as a project manager as Project Vision. So this was it was Italian Forum over, and it was being built over a train station, and quite fascinating. The first time it ever happened in Sydney, this concept of building over train station, multi-million dollar project. I mean, closer to billion. Very interesting project for us. Yeah, and going forward, then I started as Project Vision. This is a Natudzi showroom, which I have been a builder for. So the reason for me to change from architect and urban designer to project manager was because in Australia, the control of the projects are by project managers, and being an architect in India, I was always used to being, the man with the stick. So I didn't allow anyone to have a stick on me. So that's the reason I moved into, and this construction is actually done for David Jones as a builder in 2003 or 4 or something. I've forgotten now, maybe 6. Yeah, and now we are. If we go basically to the next one. So this is another of my sites. It's a aged care, and I actually was on site pretty much every third day, making sure that things are happening. And the last slide will show you a house I've recently. This is a duplex I've recently built and is trying to sell in the market. So my journey has been from being an architect for about 3-4 years, the urban designer 2.5 years. Then I went as a project manager for 5-6 years, then became a change manager because of my MBA, which was quite fascinating. And then started my own stuff, and in which we have not done any urban design, but never say never. I've just got a project recently for 300 acres of land, which hopefully I can get my urban design hat back on. It is the most fascinating. Urban design is easily the most fascinating part of my career so far.
Thank you so much for a quick round of introductions, Amitav and Gunali. I mean, that was really intriguing, and I'm sure we all are very curious to know more about more opportunities in Australia. So, Amitav, you said you've graduated from SPA Delhi and you've exposed yourself to a wide range of opportunities around the world. Why did you specifically choose a city in Australia in order to work?
Well, I came to Australia because the deal was that if quick, because migration was coming through, and came to Melbourne, worked there for 2-3 years, and then chose Sydney because Melbourne is too dead. It's too slow. And coming from Delhi, and it's 5 o'clock, they throw you out of your office because you have to go home, and so it was a very different life. So yeah, so it's Sydney. Sydney is very happening. Sydney is the biggest city in this place, and it's a dog eats dog world. So very much like Delhi, it's fast, furious. So that was the reason I chose Sydney. Lucky that I got a job then.
Mm-hmm. I bet you don't regret making that choice, right?
No longer. It was about 4-5 years. I was quite disappointed because India that time was very little known. It's unlike now. And I mean, my second interview, someone asked me, where is New Delhi? And then I was like, it's full of, SPA, new, so forget SPA. They didn't even know when New Delhi was.
That's sad, actually.
It's okay. We made up for it. Don't worry. Now they know New Delhi. They know Hisar also. We're doing well here. It's been beautiful now. It's for living. This is a brilliant place. Absolutely brilliant place. Very, very mature.
He's made billions.
Sorry,
he's already made billions in this.
Not billion. No. Come on, man.
All right. There we go.
That's Arunov. That's why he and I did the SPA. What was it called? I forgot now. Together, the show that happens once a year.
Okay.
Utopia.
Yes,
I guess Gunali is also enjoying in Australia. What's your story, Gunali? Why Australia out of all the places?
I want to fully sidetrack this and be like Melbourne's better than Sydney, but I'll keep that conversation for another day. I think when I was doing that postgraduate diploma in critical theory, I ended up studying Henry Lefebvre's rhythm analysis. And it was, I was looking for some research work which was spatial in the same topic because it's quite philosophy focused. And then, I ended up looking up this urban designer who had done some research in his PhD. And he was a senior lecturer at Melbourne University. And also, I found out later, the coordinator of urban design program in Melbourne at Uni Melbourne. So luckily, I had a colleague who had left the office in India and gone to do his PhD at Melbourne Uni. So I just got in touch with him and asked him if he knew this program and how it was. So, I feel like definitely had to do a lot of my own research. With like when you are deciding that you want to do your master's, it's probably like a really tricky question, and can be that you just get swayed by what's happening or some friend tells you something. But there's definitely opportunities in Australia for like studying, and that's how I chose to come here.
It's totally fascinating how both of you have landed in Sydney and Melbourne. So, Gunali, what can you say about the scope of urban design in Australia?
I think that similar to in India, urban designers are really rare. One of my professors here actually calls urban designers unicorns because we're so rare and so unique, or difficult to find. Like for example, in my master's program, there was 200 students in architecture, 115 planning, and about 9 to 12 of us in the urban design program. So it's a massive disparity of how many students opt for this subject because it's so niche, and also I think there's pathways from planning and architecture to come into urban design. So I think they prefer those, or So I think, there's definitely that works to our advantage when we're looking for jobs, or, there's heaps of scope for urban design. And I think in an Australian context as well, they value design quite high. Like both Sydney and Melbourne end up being in the top livable cities of the world in recurring studies that or research work that gets done about livable cities. And I think a big part of that is the value they give to design and its play out.
Yeah, right. Amitav, you've had a bounty of experience in the industry. Would you like to add something to it?
Yeah. So urban design, when I was in India, I mean, it was still, I think, at its infancy. Was very lucky to have been taught by Katie and the team, Ujan and everyone. And the biggest difference that we have had in India while doing urban design is at least this one DDA that have got the whole map of the whole city under one control. Unfortunately, out here, urban design is everything is suburb oriented. So imagine like Greta Kailash being one designer and Vasant Vyas being other designer. So having a controlled outcome has been quite rare. We have had large spaces in Sydney, which I'm again very fortunate to have worked on. So there is a place called Darling Harbour, which is Opera House area and the city. I was lucky, I was worked on about 3-4 projects on that. They were all restricted to the designer with outcome, not as a coherent thing. Of course, there's water, you can't go over the water. That's what the only restriction was there. I was also very lucky to work on the Olympic village in 2000. Now, there what happened was you literally had to put up your hand and say, look, I want to join this team. There's no concept of urban design. It was actually a very good architectural design that was an outcome rather than urban design. Times have changed. You still have got the suburbs in this. So as an urban designer now, there are, like every council has, and Gunali is a living proof, every council has urban designers in there, whether they understand the word or not, that's immaterial, at least they have the word. And there are, there's like head of urban designer in each of the council, but they're still very council meaning a geologically smaller area, not the whole city, right? But there are planning. So there's an interchangeable, in Australia, the word planning is interchangeable with urban design. So the planners with an architectural background, with the more creative people, these are the people who are coming in and creating the true urban design in the cities.
That was very insightful. I think it's good that there's a lot of scope that's happening, and it's really improved for past so many years. So I think Australia does have so much to offer, and it's going to be, or it is probably the potential magnet for the professionals. So coming to urban design as a profession, like you said, Amitav, it provides a lot of flexibility, right? So in that respect, we would like to know more about your journey from an architect to an urban designer to a project manager or a developer. So what was the inspiration? What challenges did you face? What was the entire process like?
Well, life just happens. I mean, you get an opportunity and you keep moving through. I think when you come as a migrant and, your first thing is to get a job, food on the table concept, and then you slowly start sifting through the other jobs and trying to find the better players. I was lucky. I was, got a nice couple of jobs. I was working on pretty large projects like retail centers and which are like, very big, something like Nehru Place concept, but only with retail, that size of area. So that was one, and then that they automatically become an urban design project because of the scale. You're looking at somewhere close to 1,000 specialty shops and all that. So in fact, I've been involved in one of the ones in Melbourne, Dandenong Shopping Center. So, and then the move from there to the designing suburbs with about came through. Again, I loved it. As a project manager, like I mentioned, I was wanted control on my projects, which I wasn't getting. So I moved to project management. Under my project management, there's a building that was designed by Renzo, the piano. Unfortunately, I was the project manager for that particular building in Sydney. I was second in command, not the topmost guy, but still in control for the architecture now. So it was the most beautiful experience I've had, being able to foster the architects and not push the cost barrier through them. One of the things that, as whether it's urban design, whether it's architecture, we keep forgetting this finance involved. Anyway, so that project management part of it, I did more architecture as a project manager than I have done as an architect in this country, without having to draft anything, which was good fun as well. So that's my journey. I mean, it's basically, I think if you want to make a difference, you need to be on the top to make sure that your idea is getting pushed through. It is a pyramid structure anywhere in the world. And unfortunately, Australia is one of those places where degrees and all are almost frowned upon. Like, the MBA, like I've got an MBA from one of the top universities here. It's the term here is moderate but ambitious. That's what people call MBA here. So it's, but you're sorry, someone spoke in between. So yeah, so look, if you are in control, if you have a passion for urban spaces, if you've got a passion for architecture, you will find a way to make your difference.
Right. So more on urban design practices. Being a young urban designer who has experienced both the Indian and the Australian practices of approaching urban design, Gunadi, I think you will be the right person to enlighten us about how different it is in Australia compared to the ways in which UD is practiced in India.
I think what Amitav said was quite relevant in the sense urban design sort of sits under the umbrella of planning here, whereas my exposure in India was it sits sort of with architecture. And what it does then is makes planning into two parts. One is stat planning, which is the statutory legal aspects, which is planning in India, and strategy planning, which becomes sort of like an in-between and has urban design and strategy sort of in it. So there's a lot of intended design outcomes. It's not just, a planner who draws roads and finishes it up. So urban design sort of supports that. But having said that, when I was in private practice through uni, I did work in an architecture urban design overlap. So there's a lot of like concept plans, master plans, like shopping malls, and very often gated communities and things like that. But also universities are a big aspect of design, and they get state funding, so their budgets are quite high. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest differences. Also in India, urban design isn't really to the best of my knowledge, like a designated position in local government. It's usually a private office that may be a consultant to, the BMC, which is the Brihan Mumbai, or equivalent in Delhi. And it can get quite political. Or there's the other flip side where it's very like bottom-up process of self-governance. So you'll see like communities setting up their own guidelines about, how they build their homes, and that's really at root level with NGOs and that side of urban design, which probably isn't a recognized aspect, but is very prevalent in lots of communities in India.
Right. So now, Amitav, would you like to add something? Because you have been there for a very long time, and I'm sure you've seen the change through all these years. So how different has the urban design practice been in Australia compared to India from the time you migrated there?
Well, I'll not have a clue anymore about India, except but the fact that Arunav is still around and it must be doing well. I mean, look, jokes apart, Indian architecture was much more advanced when I came in here. Everything in every aspect, India was far more advanced. Australia has been finding its way around slowly and steadily, in each aspect. Olympics in City. So we've got very good designers in Melbourne historically. They've been very good. And so Katie had asked me this question: is it a good outcome of architecture or is it urban design? And it was as my interview question. That really was a very good question for me because I kept remembering it. Melbourne is an outcome of Melbourne is an outcome of good urban design. So they've got a lot of urban spaces, urban art that is creating this, right? Which was not there in 1990. So I came in 1991, but it was still way ahead. So they have caught on to the concept of urban space, urban activities very well compared to Sydney. Sydney was good architecture creating urban spaces. So everything was purely architecture based. We've had a lot of foreign architects coming in, like Renzo I mentioned, and I was working in the up end of the town. So I was involved with all those large projects, but we never really had urban design spaces as such that don't flow into one another. Olympic Park is a good example. It has got a few things like landmarks and vistas and all that. And actually I work in Olympic Park. My office where I'm sitting right now is Olympic Park's area. But it is still not a really good urban design, so, but it had, like I mentioned, it has started growing. When we did that first picture, this is 96, 97, we were told that, we were actually given urban design wing was created in this office of ours. We have 3-4 of us. One guy was from Harvard. He was from urban design. So there was a, urge towards moving there.
Yeah.
This would have been the earliest genuine urban design project in Australia, 1995-96. Since then, now every council, like Gunali mentioned, has got an urban designer. So at least that word is there. So once the word comes in the game, reality and knowledge will follow. So,
Right.
so that is a very good thing. Hopefully we see some, overall, I think India's challenge in one suburb is bigger than entire Australia. India's amount of money in one country is less than what we can get in one city, in terms of per capita. So it's really not comparing two equal cases, but in terms of knowledge base and what India is getting through overall, I visit to, it is getting, at least the road networks are getting done properly. Even that is, so I think overall, it's very difficult to compare the two. But the knowledge of urban design is growing in both areas. Australia will obviously overtake India very fast because it's a small city. Cities are growing. They got money. They can happily rebuild everything twice without a problem. So we are, so it has been a fascinating journey of urban design for me, seeing that, from anyone who's an urban design, well, the word was unknown, to the point that now there's a director of urban design in most of the council. So it's fascinating.
Certainly. So, from the start of the conversation, I can see there's some difference in Sydney and Melbourne, right? So I suppose Sydney and Melbourne would be functioning differently too. So could you tell us more on that? Maybe how different the UD practices are in both the cities, or anything, how different are those two cities?
So historically, both the cities were quite strong right from day one. Currently, and obviously Gunali will add her bit about it, but currently Melbourne is the art capital of the country and is a far more decent crowd. People are much more, I was very lucky, came to Melbourne first because, I came to this, the decent part of Australia, the people where people talk to you decently and they look after you and, so all that. And it is definitely far more intellectually advanced than Sydney ever will be. Sydney is the money capital of the country. It is really fast. So all the traditional big offices are still in Melbourne, because all the CEOs and all used to be from Melbourne. But Sydney is where, the industry is pushed. Industry meaning overall industry everywhere. So they are the finance capital, bit like Bombay, right? But it also has a deadly trend of being pushy. So that's what Sydney is. Whereas Melbourne is like a Calcutta. When I left the country, not now. When I left the country, it is like a Calcutta with a bit more sort of maybe sophistication or a bit more like Chennai. So combine the two, but more like Calcutta than any other city that you can compare with India.
Yeah,
so just imagine a Bengali in Delhi is a problem, right? Same with Melbourne.
Okay. Gunali, do you have something to say on this?
Yeah, I think I would also say it's like Ahmedabad or Lucknow or Calcutta. Like it's, intentionally design is given a lot of importance. So it's not just urban design, but also arts and culture it's a blank canvas. Anyone can come and adapt a culture and everyone else will adapt it. Like it's that sort of a mechanism. And only in central and some inner suburbs, there are suburbs where it's a dead, quite like cookie cutter houses and like urban designer's nightmare because you're just crawling out house after house or which I think Sydney has done slightly better with managing density. I think it's also because there's more pressure for people to move there when they first come to Australia because it's like the biggest or, the financial capital. So they've got apartment blocks and whereas in Melbourne, it's such a difficult operative because people don't invest in apartments. Like that's the whole economic and social tendency that they want pieces of land as an investment. But in Sydney, they've still managed to have a high value or valuation for apartment blocks. So I guess in terms of density, Sydney is definitely more dense. So there's the urban designer has different challenges, whereas in Melbourne or in Geelong, which is like the second largest city after Melbourne, the issues or challenges are about how do you curb the sprawl or how do you do a half and half between the growth areas and city centers.
Okay. And do you see any changes in the current urban making processes from the ways it used to be earlier? Or do you think there is a change in methodologies over the years? Or the requirements of skills is different over the years, So what would you say about that?
I can talk about the current ones because I don't really know what happened before, but I think Amitav will be able to touch on those. But definitely, there's a lot more emphasis given on, at least as my role in council or even as a student and at MGS, a lot of emphasis given on data capture. So there's lots of tools available, such as GIS, and there is still old school mapping, but not as much. So spatial mapping and collection of data, especially from the government perspective, is quite accurate and easy. And you find different layers quite easily. So it helps with streamlining processes and going into the work actually versus actually capturing accurate data, which I think Australia does really well. And there's a couple of websites which are publicly available like Orin, Near Maps, which give you different georeference data as well that can feed into those softwares. I think with like when I was in consultancy versus government, the big difference or jump that I saw was government's extremely procedural. There's a very clear hierarchy with things. So each department has its own sort of specific role and responsibility. And then there's working groups where you intercollaborate with other projects that are happening and give in your input. So it's a lot more process than I had at consultancy, where you are attaching yourself to an external project and you finish it as a full turnkey and then hand it back in.
Okay. Amada, would you like to tell us how it was earlier and how it is now? Do
So
you find the change in methodologies?
yeah, so basically before it was hit and miss on urban design in here. I mean, if you had a good team, it'll be, we were building suburbs right through. I mean, Australia is a growing country, so we got suburb after suburb, and you literally have to drive down the different suburbs of different times to see how urban design has changed. But it is still suburb restricted. It is not. There's no urban design for the city. Right. So if you go to the first suburbs, let's say 1960s ones, forget the ones before, you'll have this big quarter acre, 1,000 square meter blocks and just straight roads and block on both sides. And you have got the block sizes coming smaller, but still nothing changing. Once it started after that, around 1990s, the people started thinking that, look, we have to put retail, local centers and all that. Some of these local centers then started growing and becoming sort of regional centers, for lack of word. There was original existing retail center that became bigger, larger. But again, this is purely organic. There's no real planning in all of this. And so one shopping center, then suddenly someone buys a lot of land around it and then makes a strip shopping into a mall, and then a mall to a mega mall and like that. So we're still going through opportunistic investments that were changing. And yes, there was a control on architecture, but as such urban design, there was really no thinking behind it. But the current suburbs that are coming in, now we're getting into the 350 square meter lots instead of 1,000 square meter lots. So in about 50 years, so three families are living in the same amount of piece of land that one family used to live before. So the densification has started, but not only that has started, but it has now started concept of community center being present in the suburbs, small shopping centers, sometimes large shopping centers being present in the suburbs while they're designing. Sports grounds and all were always there. There's an extremely fun-loving and sports country, so parks and walks were there. But it's been like the country I've seen is not about education, it's about trial and error. So they'll build something, they realize the mistake, next time they'll go make something better, then make something better. And very frankly, now I went to a suburb which is quite recent, and it's about 1.5 hours almost from my home, or 1 hour from my home. I was amazed to see the quality of work that has been done with the community center, with common open spaces, with the basic landscape, with the road sizes, the traffic, calming devices present without actually being an eyesore, and the parking, restriction of parking, all that sort of things have come in. And it's just a beautiful looking suburb. And again, it has risen. This is no longer by accident. These are people who are designing these, are actually educated in these lines. I don't know who did it, but you can see by the result, it's so from an accidental way that we were coming through about 50 years back. And I'm here 30 plus. So I can talk about the 20 years before because those developments are new. Where now, we have, so surveyor used to do, surveyor will go and do urban, new lot allotments. From there, the architects moved in around my time, 96, 97. We were we started challenging the bylaws and creating, mainly for money. I was working for a development company where we're challenging bylaws to make smaller lots, not and then putting urban design paraphernalia around it for the council to feel happy to let us, make 35 lots instead of 20 lots that was allowed before. So money does drive, and that's something I keep telling everyone. Money drives architecture. We have to remember that. But so here now, but this current suburb I've seen in Melbourne, Melbourne, I haven't seen, but in Sydney, is really a piece of art. The last one I've been to, it's with the the colors, the controls on the buildings, everything. I mean, so the country is coming together, at least at a suburb basis. We do not have, but we still have the problems of if you're driving from the city, which is high dense, for 50-story multi-stories. Then you go to a suburb which is 3-story high. Then you go to a suburb which is 10-story high. Then you go to another suburb which is completely ground, 1,000 square meter blocks. And then next suburb, you've got a 140-story high. Because there's no central control of the city. And the densification has been very erratic. You can be sitting in one suburb which has got multi-story apartments, and very next suburb is just 2-story housing blocks. That's it. So it's overall, I think, look, in Australia, I can talk about India, like I mentioned, it's just as a tourist 3 times a year. But in India, Australia, definitely, in Sydney at least, there's knowledge about urban spaces growing.
That's really good to know. So more on your experiences in the country itself. Australia and India are quite different, as we know, in terms of culture, climate, languages, everything. So I'm sure, like any other immigrant, there would have been a phase of adjustment to the new place when you first migrated in Australia. So what are the problems or challenges you faced when you first landed there, Gunali? And most importantly, how did you overcome these?
I think there's some things you just can't put in.
Sorry, I think there's someone's mic is on. Can you please kindly switch it off? I think Sonam Sachdevan. Devan, or if you could mute the person. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Gunali, go ahead.
Yeah, like there's some things you just can't put into a checklist, when you're moving country, and that's sort of the emotional aspects where you are going to be going, like Amitav said, from a very dense, I was in Bombay, and apartments and 350 is a luxury, 350 square meters is a luxury. So when you go into a place where after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, especially in the winter, it's like sun has set and there is complete isolation, and shops are also closed, and you are making new friends. That's, I think, one of the aspects which is very starkly different. And yeah, especially through COVID, it was quite an unanticipated time. So something that I think young urban designers should factor in when they get up and leave from India is you will be changing, your entire scene, your climate, and people around you, the way they help you, the way they speak to you. But luckily, Australians are all English speaking, and you also either ride your bike or drive on the same side as India. So most of the rules end up being the same. And from an education perspective, there's a lot of value to like theory and referencing. So it's a very different approach from India. And again, it plays out very differently in the practical world as well, that education may or may not be relevant. Whether it translates into the actual world is very much dependent on, what you end up doing in your life. Like, are you still in academia or are you working in practice? And so, like, even working while you're studying is really highly encouraged, and not just in your own field, even working. And anyone who lives internationally will know this, like there's a lot more respect for labor, and culturally, it's not seen as a class system either. So you can work in different interests that you might have. You can work in different sectors. So it's very high value, and you might end up making more money than an urban designer would. So, that non-hierarchy of earning opportunities is really, really good. Though the question was about challenges, but there's silver linings to those challenges. Yeah.
And how was the application process for your job? I mean, how difficult it is to get a work visa there?
For someone who's coming from an international perspective, it's, unless you have years of experience or you already have a visa, because either you are, dependent on your partner that already has a visa, or you've been here before and have a visa, it's quite easy, because there are very few urban designers and there's a dearth of urban designers. So they are always hiring and creating new positions. And, if a certain position gets vacant in one office, that gap is filled by someone else from another office. So there's always vacancy, because things are just growing, cities are just getting bigger and bigger. And so if you have a visa, it's really easy to get a job. But I think the main requirement as international expats is to get that visa. And so I would say if you study at a university here, it's a good pathway to get that visa. And yeah, and you go through the same process of application that anyone else would once you've
Okay. And so
applied.
is a degree, sorry. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you if a degree from an Australian university is mandatory, or do you really need an American university or a UK university, or is it helpful in any way to get jobs in Australia?
I hope I'm like not politically incorrect, but I feel like in Australia, if you studied in Australia, it's of much higher value than if you've come in from any like big university, even Ivy Leagues or something else, as a fresh graduate. And it means any university, it's not just the top universities, because once you've applied, they look at, are you local? Your conversation with them and your interviews are way more important than your resume. They don't really give too much, you can have a really good score and it improves your opportunity and your pathways. But what makes it, and this is something I personally also felt, because I was trying to apply for a studio because there's 10 options for us in our master's program to select a studio. And the studio I wanted to apply for was not open unless you were in your thesis year, and I wasn't in your thesis semester. And I applied for it nevertheless. So because of the process of prerequisite courses, I couldn't get the studio, but the studio leader happened to work at MGS and she offered me a job. So I feel like they did not look at, my individual qualifications or that opportunity. They actually saw that I'm really keen on studying something that they had of value. So that sort of brings more credibility to you. Speaking to people, asking them to help you, mentor you, asking them the right questions definitely helps you build your network here and get more opportunities versus just having, very good qualifications, which are also important. I guess that's also a good pathway, but networking is also quite
important. Yeah. And the courses in these universities, Australian universities, are also quite expensive. So could you also throw some light on how can one obtain scholarships, or is there any other way for fundings?
So good question. I think for the scholarship aspect, the marks matter when you are applying for the university. So your bachelor's score might matter there. And essentially, if you do your own research, each individual university has certain scholarships. And in Australia, I think in Melbourne and Sydney, there are scholarships for South Asian students. But then you have to be above a certain CGPA or grade point. And then you get a pathway into a scholarship. So there's that opportunity. It's available on the individual websites of the universities. So doing that bit of research, even if someone tells you one thing, it might have changed. So the website has the latest information. It takes a bit of getting used to having to go to the website and seeing it, but it's your career and your future. So, just be on your own research, whether it's about Australia or any other country, is what is the opportunity that you're going to be studying, and then what's the play out. So after your master's as well, you have to think. So I think Australia has that benefit that when you do a 2 years master's here, you get a 2 years visa to stay on. And that's a really good, a surety for you with time. Because once your master's is done, if your visa ends, the time aspect gets really tricky if you have to land a job within a month or 4 months, 6 months of your job. And then most people end up going back to India, and there's opportunities in India as well, but if you want to stay on, that can be tricky. So Australia gives you those 2 years, and you can also make up your mind about, do you enjoy this or not, and it's sufficient time to make a decision and leave if you feel like there's another opportunity that's better somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, that's really helpful information for all the aspiring students and professionals, for sure. So can you also quickly touch upon the additional benefits that you get in Australia, apart from salary, of course? Maybe social life, family life, entertainment, security, lifestyle, any of you?
Amitav, do you want to go first?
Sure. It's a beautiful, it's a diagonally opposite country from India. That's what I have maintained all my life. whatever happens in India doesn't happen here and vice versa, except they follow cricket, but you know. So in terms of what you have in this country is an extreme level of social support. Anyone who is sick, anyone who is not strong, they have the government support. As for, we got spaces, you can run, you can, Gunali mentioned of dignity of labor, it's huge dignity of labor. In fact, and again, Gunali mentioned hands-on people are earning a lot more than professionals. That's very true. Historically, I pay my supervisors on the site a lot more money than I ever have to pay architects. And it's been the same. I mean, I was offered when I was quite young, offered a taxi driver telling me, "Aap pagal ho. You're doing work at 12 o'clock, not getting overtime." And I think I was on a $50,000 salary. He was on a $77,000 cash. And I had about a 20 minutes, 40 minutes drive, and you're constantly trying to convince me that I should be a taxi driver from the next day. And out of his heart, good intention, and then guys are laughing, but trust me, he was earning 50% more money and in cash. I was almost earning 100% more money than me, and I was working longer hours than him. So, but the country has a safety net. In case something goes wrong with you, God forbid, this country will support it. If your kids are looked after like kings and queens, the brilliant education, everything is free. The courses Gunali is doing at, I don't know how much it costs. My MBA cost $60,000, but when I came in the country, could have done it free with a loan. My company paid for it, but now I think it's like 100,000 or something. But there's systems here where will be looked after by the state. The taxation is huge, and every professional cribs about it. But the fact is, you got good, very very high level of health, free education. Universities, you have to take a loan, but you're still doing well. So in terms of, again, because it's a rich country, it's like a very very rich country, and it can afford it. All this sort of thing. Unfortunately, India is it's a different ballgame. In terms of professionally, when I came in here, I felt as if I've just dug my own grave, because the intellectual level was so low that time compared to even, as a 27-year-old, I felt like even, the masters here were way behind what we had learned in the studio, which was a shame. But I think when this Gunali will be more closer to the truth, I think it's getting better. I mean, maybe we have come from, the 10% in the world to maybe 40-50% now. I don't know, in terms of sophistication. It will never be Europe. It'll be impossible to become a Scandinavian country in urban design, Australia wise. But yeah, so in your lifestyle, you will get a safety net, a better living standards virtually from the day you land here. In your profession, internationally, you'll be extremely lucky to even be counted in the top 10%, forget anything higher, because you don't have the exposures. So you have to be happy with I got only one project with Renzo was here, but in Europe, Renzo is on every project. So if I was a project manager on one, I may have done 5 of them, 6 of them, in which you get you look back and say, okay, this is my building that I managed. Whereas the Renzo Piano's building, there's only 2 buildings here. So it's like that. So our opportunity, we're 25 million people country. It's a big country, free world, everything. Professionally, you guys have to really think it through. And you have to keep hanging your hat on whatever little opportunities you get. And you have to be very lucky. That's the other thing. You'll have one Renzo's building in 10 years in this country. In US, in Europe, you have 40 of them happening in 1 year. So you have to be one of the 40, to get to score that job. Whereas here, to get the really well-known jobs, you have to be once a year, 1 in 10 years. But you will have food on your table. You'll have respect. You will have, all the basic creature comforts that you can think of. And God forbid, like I'm repeating, if anything goes wrong, the country will hold you. Every single life in this country is absolutely precious. People have spent over $50 million trying to look for one man who has gone hiking and lost. So it's amazing that way. This country's heart is huge. So I don't know if it's any conclusive statement, but that's it.
No, I think that is what everyone thinks about when they're shifting, and when they're moving out out of their own country. I think this is what they're looking for. So I think it ties you down to a place. All of these other aspects apart from your profession. Yeah, Gunari, do you want to add something?
As a professionally, it's hard. Sorry, is it Gunali? I jumped in. Excuse me.
No,
But
you
yeah,
can
professionally,
go.
it's
I
very
think
difficult.
you have way more experience with this.
No, but professionally, this is a very hard country to get exposure because of lack of opportunities. But living wise, emotionally, pressure points. I mean, there's no pressure like Gunali mentioned. 5 o'clock, even at now, like I came in 1991. It's like 5 o'clock. You want to go and get a coffee. It's like you guys will look at me as if I'm mad. So 5 o'clock you want coffee, go home and sleep. And offices used to literally, the cleaner will come, used to throw me out. I have got this Indian thing, work hard, climb up the
Yeah, it's
ladder,
actually frowned
graduate.
upon. It shows that you're inefficient if you do overtime.
No, they throw you out. The cleaner said, "What are you doing here? Go home, go home." And then it's like, at that time I was like, you have a small baby, you have to keep earning, keep working hard, can't lose my job. Forget it. Go home, enjoy your baby. That was it. So, it was, so very, very different country from India. Just everything that happens in India, just think opposite, that's Australia.
Okay. Right. And, all the aspirants here would definitely be interested in my last question, which is what organizations or portals would you recommend to students who are starting out in the job application process, or in general, how can they get hold of job opportunities?
I think LinkedIn is a good option. But like I said, if you don't have work rights here, that's like your PR or your work visa, it's really tricky because they get several applications from, it is a migrant rich country, and they invite a lot of migrants. They want people. So there is lots of pathways. So sponsorship for urban design is very low. I think I should touch on this, that urban design is not a recognized recognized field in the skill list, which is the PR list that Australia issues. So you have to get in through the pathway of either architecture or planning.
Okay.
And there's different requirements in those. You have to get a skills assessment done from the authorities of either AIA or PIA. And it's a very long, very expensive process. So I think all the benefits that Amitav spoke of, they are once you have citizenship or residency. If you come here as an international student, it's a very expensive investment. So if you get a scholarship, that's really beneficial. But if not, then there's also the opportunity that if you get a job, you will be able to pay back your loan or something in the 2 years. It's a chance. I'm not saying that it's like 100% that yes, you'll come and you'll get a job and you can pay it off. But you'll really have to hustle if that's the pressure you have of the economics of it. But there is the pathway. There is the opportunity that when you finish your study, you can stay on for 2 years and get the benefits of it. But once you get your residency, the next day you get all the benefits. So you get your health card, which basically gives you free access to any hospital, public hospital. And there are several benefits once you've come in. And sorry, going back to the question of, LinkedIn is a good, portal to use, or there's several like job seeking. Seek is one, and a few other portals. And in terms of places, there's so many public and private places, and it's not a Starchitect spot. It's not where you will get the names of big people. There's a lot of other issues which Australians are fighting their own battles, I would say, is that there is lots of importance at the moment. And I'm really happy that I'm in a world where this is the most important thing, is to get Aboriginal reconciliation, to have, inclusion and diversity in spaces and places, and have equity for everyone. So while the economics of it is there, sentiment sometimes is, oh, you're migrant, or especially through COVID, you saw a lot of attacks like that happen. But there is a lot of progress in terms of mindsets towards being more accommodating. So even, integrating an Aboriginal significant, like an elder person into urban plans is really important, because you're trying to see how they would see that space and whether it's in tandem with their process. And yeah, so there's different challenges and battles that Australia fights, which are not something that you would see in Australia, in America or Europe. And they're working and sifting through them.
Okay, I think we're well in time. Thank you so much, Amitav and Kunali, for an engaging conversation today. It's been a pleasure to have both of you. I'm sure this discussion would have helped widen opportunities for all the young urban designers here today. Really, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much again. We'll be taking up questions at the end of session 2. So if you have any questions for Amitav and Kunali, please post them in the chat box. Further, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you of the National Conference of Urban Design Arunav sir mentioned at the beginning of this session, the IUDI NatCon, which is happening in September in Goa. Please do join us there to experience a beautiful weather along with some urban design gupshup and networking. So we'll be posting the details in the chat box soon. Please go through it. We were intending to take a small short break, but since we started late, we would just start and jump into our next session, which is on Europe and UK. Deban, over to you.
Thank you, Akanksha, and again Gunali and Amitav for such a wonderful session. And yeah, during Q&A, I guess we will discuss more. Akanksha, my screen is visible, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So yes, the second part of our session today will focus on the Europe and UK region. And for this session, Insia will be our moderator. So Insia is an urban designer with a background in architecture. She did her undergraduate course at Chandigarh College of Architecture from 2014 to 2019, and her master's in urban design from School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi from 2019-2021. She has also worked on many freelance architecture projects in India and worked for Chandigarh administration for a brief time. Currently residing in Dubai, she is employed at AECOM Middle East as an urban designer, working on varied scale projects across the Middle East from 2022 till date. So thank you, Insia, for being with us today. Now, we are also happy to have Rahul and Prachi here with us as panelists for this session. So Rahul is our first panelist. He's an urban designer at We Love the City, Rotterdam, Netherlands. His expertise lies in participatory planning and design formed by a creative coalition between citizens, government, and entrepreneurs. Currently, he's engaged in developing area visions and urban strategies for 2 Dutch cities. He has previously worked as an architect for Vastu Shilpa Consultants, Sangat, India. In 2017, he graduated with distinction in MSc in Urbanism from Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. He completed his bachelor in architecture from Bengal Engineering and Science University, Shibpur, India, now known as IIST, in 2012. Using sketching as a tool, his design approach links planning, research, and urban solutions to public space and investment. He has also contributed to a chapter titled Urban Metabolism and Land Use Optimization in a 2019 Elsevier publication on understanding the disaster risk, a multidimensional approach. So welcome, Rahul. And Prachi is our second panelist. So she is a co-founding director at Eco-Responsive Environments, an award-winning architectural and urban design practice based in London. With a singular mission, we design to support health and well-being today and for future generations. Current relevant experience includes a proven track record for innovation in low carbon design. This encompasses 2 RIBA competition winning master plan projects, a strategic master plan for a 45-hectare expansion site to the north of Letchworth Garden City for 900 new homes, amenities, and a primary school, and a master plan for regenerating the 60-acre health, business, and technical park in Runcorn. As a mixed-use zero-carbon neighborhood, having taken a strong system-based approach to environmental and social sustainability, the Hill Park Master Plan was selected as one of 35 green innovation schemes featured in UK government's new Global Investment Atlas and showcased as part of UK's Global Investment Summit in 2021. The project also won a Golden Pineapple in the Future Place category of Pineapple Awards 2022 and has recently been selected as a finalist for the National Urban Design Group Awards 2023. So thank you, Insia, Rahul, and Prachi for joining this discussion today. Insia, over to you.
Thank you, Debayan. Hello, everyone. We all are back for our second interaction of the series, Who Am I, the Designer? And I'm Insia. I'll be your host for the Europe session. So today we are elated to have with us two of our young and dynamic IUDI Global Chapter members. We have Rahul Devan from Netherlands, and we have Prachi from UK. They'll be sharing their urban design experiences today. Sorry, Somebody's mic is working. Can you mute? Yeah, thank you. So let's begin. Maybe we can start with Rahul. Tell us about your journey, Rahul.
Thank you, everyone, and Deban for the introduction. It's quite, I mean, you told everything, I guess, in your introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Rahul Devan. I am from Calcutta. I grew up in Calcutta and later moved to Rotterdam for my master's program. I work here as an urban designer with a focus particularly on public space. And so in my presentation, I will talk a little bit about my journey and also what currently Netherlands is practicing in urban design. If you go to the next one slide. I did my architecture course in for my bachelor's program in B College Shibpur, and after that I worked as an architect at Vastu Shilpa Consultants, where I worked there for 3 years, and it kind of influences you a lot because you meet a lot of people from different backgrounds and different places around the world that influences you to look furthermore into your professional field, which influenced me to apply for my master's in urbanism at TU Delft. After graduating from TU Delft, I started working in Wheel of the City. It's a participatory planning and design office. Next, I think. What happens in the Netherlands is before 2008, Netherlands had a very top-down approach of urban planning and design. And after 2008, they changed it to the structure. They changed it to a structural vision, where it became extremely decentralized. So there are 13 policies which in the structural vision that includes infrastructure and spatial planning, which is set by the central government. And what happens is the local government and local authorities are completely responsible for how to do it. For example, protection from water, to answer housing needs, to answer migration, etc. Next. So I'll be talking about 3 of the points that I'm currently working on, part of these 13 principles that is set by the national government. First is to keep your feet dry, which is very important because 1/3 of the country is underwater. And it is, so there are a lot of techniques and engineering to solve that issue. But what is important here is that here they've really focused a lot on public space. What are the spatial implications of engineering and design? So that's the first one. The second one is next, Devan. Yeah. The next one is the national government has recently declared to achieve 1 million homes by 2030. And it's a very small country, and it's highly densely populated. So right now, all the cities are also working hard on trying to achieve this 1 million homes. And what is interesting that is happening is the station areas are getting transformed into working, living, and work, living, and recreational spaces. And there's a new publication that has been released by the national authorities that focus on it's kind of a call, this publication, on the quality of public space around a station area, which they mention as nodes. And that gives a different perspective of how station areas should work. So this is one of the examples of how you can achieve 1 million homes. And the other one, next one, Devan, is Netherlands is heavily infrastructured country. And one of the most important element of it is cycling. As you know, the country, there are 17 million people in this country, and there are 22 or 23 million bicycles. So it's the issue is more here, like per person, the bicycle capita, I think so 1.3 per person cycling. So it's a huge issue as well. But how can we make it much more safer? For example, Amsterdam is right now, what they are trying to do is that they're experimenting with their streets and changing them into the car streets. They are discouraging use of car, and they are transforming them into cycle streets. So these are kind of the 3 elements that I'm working on. And if you have interests in one of these 3 topics, I think so Netherlands is a good place to start also professionally, I guess. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Rahul. We'd like to hear from Prachi now.
Thanks, Insia and Debayan. Before I start, I think Rahul lives in one of my favorite countries. I am so jealous of him. So I will keep this really short. So the purpose of this is for me to just give a very brief introduction about myself. So I was born and brought up in Kolkata. I studied architecture in the College Shibpur, like Rahul. As part of the 6-month internship of the 5-year BArch course, I did my internship at Sangat for about 6-8 months. And after that, I pursued a master's in urban design at Oxford Brookes University in the UK. So I didn't really take any professional break for experience between my 2 sort of educational degrees, and sort of a mixture of having studied in India, studying in the UK, as well as the professional exposure, albeit limited, but the exposure that I got at Sangat sort of did set quite robust foundations for my next years. So next slide, please, Insia. So then the next turning point really happened when I was in Oxford, and I finished my master's. And as a student, there was an announcement that there is a seminal publication called Responsive Environments, which was published in 1986, and it sort of had a very significant impact on the UK planning system since 1986, and continues to have that influence. And the professors who were lead authors for that publication were actually teaching us in our master's course. So at that point, they wanted to revise and update the book. And I'm talking about 2010 now. So it's like 15 years, 20 years ahead than when it was originally published. And so we were giving an introduction. An announcement was made that if any student wants to volunteer to help with the task, to get in touch. And as a student, I probably had nothing better to do in life at that point in time. So I signed up, and so we started to work on the revised edition of the book. But as we were working through that, we realized that just a mere revision of the book might not really contribute very meaningfully to the current and emerging issues of that decade. So 2010 onwards, we were talking about climate change, etc., biodiversity emergencies. Obviously, at that point, it was still not as urgent, considered as urgent as it's today after a decade. But we realized, and so we had a critical discussion about what is the purpose? Why are we even updating this book? Yes, it has served its purpose in the past, but what is its future? So as part of the discussion, we realized that we should actually be writing a new book and not just be updating the old book. So one thing just led to the other. It was a very spontaneous conversation in a cafe at some point, and we were like, well, we lose nothing. Why don't we just submit an abstract to the publishers who were Routledge? And we submitted an abstract, and Routledge agreed to the idea that, okay, well, we are happy to do a new book. So we must be crazy because we were 75% done with revising the old edition. And at that point, we were like, well, let's just like, let's just like forget everything we've done and start from scratch. So that was a turning point because that was 2011. Now we are in 2023 and we are still finishing that book, believe me or not. So it has been a journey, but in this 10 to 12 years, obviously I've learned a lot as part of being, a part of a team who has extremely seasoned academics, very experienced professional practitioners who've been in the, who've lived and practiced in the UK for a very long time. In those 10 to 12 years, as a group, we were 4 of us were involved, and 2 of the lead authors of the original book were involved as well. And then the other 2 were sort of us, kind of the more young ones of the team. And as part of writing the book, we were quite keen to weave it with practice so we can understand how the approach to the book is informed by practice and the realities of practice. So that is where, if you go to the next slide, Insia, so we started to, in this period of, in this decade, we started to test the ideas, the approaches. We started to expand our professional network, to explore where things are done more innovatively. And I think our focus really was on trying from different avenues, whether it is practice. I was practicing at that time in an architectural and urban design practice in London as a full-time employee. We were also involved in giving training courses, presentations, both to different universities as well as to delegations from China, Brazil, and elsewhere all over the globe. And we would be doing study trips and field trips to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, London, Barcelona. Again, to sort of, obviously these are all really engaging experiences and they all contribute to your learning. But for us, the hidden agenda really is what can we learn and how would that influence the book and our approach. And I think as part of this process, what was really important for us is not to try and reinvent the wheel, because there are a lot of brilliant people all around the world who know or have solutions to problems and have implemented them. So for us, it was really a matter of finding, just really good research and really good collaborative partners, whether they are professionals or academics, to increase our exposure of how things are done where in different places and what can we learn from them. So we tested this approach, and finally, I think in 2023, we will be submitting the manuscript to Routledge and it should be published next year. But as part of this process in 2019, we realized that instead of just testing them in bitty ways through different avenues, we should find a project to do ourselves, because when you are testing an approach through an actual project, then the challenges of that approach, or where we are trying to really sort of go against the accepted status quo or the accepted norm, will be really stark. As I think Amitav had highlighted multiple times in his presentation, that money matters and finance really matters when it comes to delivering development. So it was really important to us to, sort of get our feet dirty and see how far does the approach actually stick or stand, and how much can you push boundaries realistically at this point in time. So in order to do that, we came across a design competition by RIBA, which was called Reimagining the Garden City. It was a extension project for about 900 homes in Letchworth. So it's a UK-based small town. And we entered that competition, but we realized that in order to do that competition, we need to be a registered practice. You can't just do it as an entity, independent entity. So, well, we found a practice. So if you go to the next slide, Insia, that's how the design practice, eco-responsive environments, was born. It was born from simply the desire of testing the approach of the book, and it's an ongoing process, really. So we found the practice in 2018, end of 2018. So we are about 3-4 years old now. We've been fortunate to be able to work with really interesting, innovative consultants, collaborators, enlightened clients as well. Well, there are bog standard clients too. And I think that was a learning curve for us in relation to where and how we can push the thinking that we were developing for the book. So as Debayan mentioned, our mission is singular. We do design to support health and well-being for projects of all scales. And so to my last slide, which is on our work so far. It really varies. So it varies from strategic master planning to detailed planning for both master plans as well as smaller projects, which might be urban infill project instead of a suburban extension. It also includes public realm regeneration of town centers. And I think particularly post-COVID, we've also been looking at sort of how to integrate urban greening into the more disused and underused spaces of cities like London. So it's quite varied, but I'll stop now. I think we'll have a lot more room for discussion through the questions.
Thank you, Prachi. I'm sure everybody's looking for the session now. Now, many of us after our bachelor's are very confused about what discipline to pick. So Rahul, what made you choose urban design and what made you choose Netherlands? Were there any challenges for you?
Well, I was confused after my high school itself what to pursue. So, but I was sure that I didn't want to do engineering and something related to design. That was for sure I wanted to know. And yeah, then I applied for, I got selected for a Bachelor's of Architecture at in Shibpur. And yeah, I didn't know anybody in architecture as well from my family or friends in my family friend circle. While studying there, yes, Prachiti was also there, and I think via her I came to know about Vastuship consultant Sangat, and I also didn't know about Vastuship before. And then I did my internship there, luckily, and I also worked there as an architect. And while working in Vastuship consultants, I will say in the city of Ahmedabad, it kind of gives you a very different environment. You get to meet people from different backgrounds, different parts of the world. And I came to know about TUDEL in Ahmedabad. Yeah, after 3 years, I just applied for my master's program, got selected. And why Netherlands? Mostly because of the course structure. It was a 2 years course structure. Instead of a semester system here, they have a quarter system. So the first year is based on 4 quarters where they introduce you to 4 scales of urbanism. And then the final year, you can select your research group and you can do your thesis, whichever research group in planning, or you want to go to really neighborhood scale, or you want to go with water protection from water. So there are different research groups in TUDEL, and that as Prachiti was saying, that it's a process. It's always a process. It's very difficult to plan from, okay, in 10 years, I'm going to do, it's a little bit difficult, I guess.
I'm sure it must have been very challenging for you. So
yeah, I will say yes. Yes, okay. I will say yes.
Prachi, I'd like to ask you the same question. What made you choose urban design and why UK?
I think why urban design, I'll answer that first and then why UK. So why urban design? When I was doing my architectural education, and particularly when I was doing my internship at Sangat, I think that is where I sort of got hooked on to urban design and sort of the value of spaces in between buildings that should be symbiotic, in a symbiotic relationship to each other. And also the value of a transdisciplinary approach in order to find optimal solution for the built environment. I think those two things, it just made me feel at that point in time that, you know, having a specialization in urban design will make me pursue both. So I went for urban design. And why UK? Because 2 reasons. At that point in UK, there was a well, there still is. There was a possibility to apply for a post-study work visa, and I did not want to immediately go back to India. I did want to get some experience abroad. And UK is an English-speaking country, so I didn't have to learn another language. So even though I did apply to European countries as well, and I got a scholarship too, but I chose UK over, Italy. So yeah, I think that'll be my answer.
But, as far as we all know that these courses are very competitive and also very expensive, especially for Indian students. Can you tell us about the application processes and how we can fund it? We can start with you, Prachi. How was your experience at Oxford?
The application process, because I had exposure to both, sort of application to European universities as well as to UK, they were different. I don't know what they are now. I'm talking like 10 years ago, but they were different. So I had applied for Domus Academy in Italy, and their application process was driven by a design competition, which was for a local site. And yes, of course, we had to submit our CV and portfolio, but if you would not get the minimum marks that you needed or whatever, grade on the design competition entry, then they would not even look into your CV and portfolio, essentially. But UK, it was kind of quite a standard process. So you submit your CV, portfolio, statement of purpose, you have to give your IELTS exam, you have to get the minimum benchmark scores. And you just have to submit it to the various universities within the stipulated deadline. I think I was not, so I submitted my application quite late. In UK, it's quite open, like sort of you can say if the session starts in September, for instance, you could even submit your application in March, like as early as 6 months. A lot of people do that as well. Or the deadline for, I think, application then was August, sort of end of July, August beginning. And I think I was sort of like, I just managed to email my application before the deadline. But Domus Academy was really different. Their timescales were quite stringent at that point in time. They had like 1 week design competition, that's it, boom. And then, you submit, you give your documents later if we ask for it. So it was that sort of a situation. In terms of application processes, it also depends whether you want to apply for scholarship or not. There are, of course, challenges around financing your education. That would be, true anywhere, particularly if you're coming from India because of the exchange rates. So there are only some options, aren't there? You either have a scholarship or you self-fund yourself or you get a loan in one way or the other. So in terms of, yeah, it can be quite expensive. I mean, when I was studying about 10 years ago, it was still just about affordable, I think. But now the UK fees for international students it's just bonkers. I mean, I now teach on the MA program, the MA Urban Design program at Oxford Brookes, where I graduated from. And the fee has changed from like 7 lakhs, an annual tuition fee, 7 lakhs from what I paid to like, I think it is 22 lakhs now. So it's like almost like close to 4 times. So it's just absolutely insane. And that has had an impact on the amount of intake they get, sort of direct entry students from countries like India. But scholarships are very competitive, and it will be really, really, I mean, you really need to have your portfolio, statement of purpose, your BArch marks, etc., sort of like top notch in order to be able to be eligible. And they have very stringent deadlines. So, and you can apply for scholarship both for, by that university, but also there might be other organizations such as Joseph Rowntree Foundation. There might be others like British Council. There might be scholarships from British Council, for instance, which I think, I mean, to be fair, I am not that much, like kind of in the loop right now on scholarships, but yes, it's definitely worth keeping a close watch on what scholarships are available, what are the deadlines, etc. Maybe Rahul will be more updated.
Not really, I don't think so. It's been 7 years for me as well, but I think what you said is exactly similar to Netherlands. only here is for scholarship. I think you need to apply before November, as far as I remember. At that time, it was in 2015. And otherwise, the deadline was March with SOP, portfolio with certain grade scores that you need to as documents. The only thing I will add is that because in Europe, it's not an English-speaking country. So when you write your SOP, what is very important is that you shouldn't make it very flowery, short sentences. That's it. It's very so that is very quite important in your SOP, in your statement of purpose. But luckily for Netherlands, for TUDEF, my course was in English. And it was quite international, I would say. So I think there is a 50% Dutch students and 50% internationals. There's a mix like that. And because I see one of the questions also, did I have to learn Dutch? So here in Netherlands, I think so 98% of the people speak English, and it was not part of the course at all. But yes, it's always good to learn the language as well. But otherwise, part of the application and scholarship, yes, scholarship is also quite difficult, I will say, because there are minimum, I think so, 1 or 2 scholarship only from the architecture department, urbanism and architecture department. And
I think Rahul's absolutely right. The CV and the portfolio just needs to be extremely to the point. They have like reams and reams of material to go through from prospective applicants. And if you're not to the point, then you just kind of get lost in the crowd. You do need to be able to stand out, be memorable. So kind of structuring it in a, sort of short paragraphs, having subheadings, having an image with a clear caption, not trying to describe everything that you may know, but trying to pick out, what is it that you're trying to convey and why, is more important than being able to explain the whole process. So I think being critical about what you include in the CV and portfolio is quite key. And just another thing about when you're trying to select courses in terms of application processes, etc. And if you're kind of like gauging between various universities, it is really important to understand the module structure as well as who the faculty will be. So like, for example, what happened with me was that the reason why I chose Oxford Brookes, even though there were other universities, UK universities I applied to, was because of its faculty, and it had a really strong research tradition. So depending on what your interests are, you should have a detailed research. And generally what happens, at least in the UK universities, is that you can contact them for more information if you have any questions. They will even put you in touch with, past students or existing student union representatives or existing tutors who lead a particular module. So understand as much as you can what the module is about. If you have any confusion, I would say, to get clarity rather than just kind of like jumping sort of, like partially blind, because you want to be spending a lot of money and then and then be like, oh no, like what have I signed up for? You don't want to be doing that. So yeah,
that's great to hear. I know like students listening would have some clear clarity now. So Prachi, we all know that you've been running your own urban design firm in UK. Can you share your overall experience and what are the challenges that you faced and the processes that everyone must follow to open their own firm abroad?
Yeah, it's a process fraught with challenges. Every day is a new challenge. So firstly, I think in UK at least, you need to be in the country for 5 years on a work visa before you can be legally permitted to open your own practice. You cannot have your own business right after your master's degree. So for example, if I'd wanted to open my practice just after graduating as from Brookes, I cannot, it's not legally permitted. So you do need to be able to find a job. You do need to be in the job, in a stable job for 5 years. For that, you need to have a tier 2 work visa. For that, you need to have a sponsor, and only employers can sponsor you. So, and generally, the UK Border Agency will have a list of their sponsors. So for example, if you Google, you will even find UK architectural practices who are licensed with the UK BA to sponsor international students. that information is available as well. So that does mean that when you are looking out for jobs, your search does narrow down a little bit, because you don't want to be, getting a job in a practice where eventually they will not be able to sponsor you and you'll have to find elsewhere. Of course, if you do want to go back to the country and you're there only for a particular period to get experience, yes, for sure, then you have a lot of options open. In my time, obviously, I had the luxury of a post-study work visa, which was stopped for a particular period in time, but has been reinstated now again. So I think that is good news, partially, for people who do want to opt for this route. So after you've completed your 5 years, you do have to apply for an indefinite leave to remain, which I think is something which would be an equivalent to what Gunali was mentioning previously about residency permit for Australia. So once you get that, only then you have the legal permission to open a practice or to have a registered company with you as a, sort of a director, partner, or whatever. So that's this kind of the process behind registering a practice. Now, actually running a practice is a completely different ballgame. From working in a practice so I was working in a central London practice called PDP London Architects. And now they've recently rebranded as Studio PDP. And it was a practice, 100 strong, 80 strong, 100 strong practice with like other offices in Hong Kong, Madrid. So in a situation where I'm just focusing on what probably might be perceived as the fun bits of the job, which is actually getting the work done, all of the administration, all of the financial matters, everything is kind of, in the background getting dealt with by other people, other departments in the practice. When you're running your own practice, you're basically doing all of it. So it is a challenge. It is a real challenge. Finding new work is a challenge. Being able to, particularly in the climate of COVID, as well as Brexit, there has been so much political turmoil, uncertainty around the construction industry in the UK. So being able to be resilient through these sort of events. Right now, UK is in economic recession. The interest rates are rising like mad. They are trying urgently to curb inflation. So a lot of this actually does impact on the services we provide and the way in which services are provided. So yeah, I mean, I think you do need to be sort of have these skills to be able to, a strong professional network really helps to be able to win new work. Every country has their own ways and means and processes of applying for new work, whether it is in private or public sector. Obviously, public sector will be more, they'll have more procedural aspects associated with it because they do have to be inclusive and fair when it comes to tendering processes. Private sector jobs mostly rely on either you win it through competitions, such as we did for Reimagining the Garden City, or you, sorry about the background noise, or you win it through professional networks. So yeah, I think we are still finding our ropes, to be honest. As I said, it wasn't the intention that you find a practice or I co-found a practice. Yeah, we sort of just ended up in it. And since then, I think it's been an uncharted journey. So we are still finding our feet, to be honest. Every day is a new day.
What about you, Rahul? You've been working with the Dutch government, right? Can you elaborate your roles and responsibilities there?
Rules and responsibilities, yeah. Working in the Netherlands, I think so. It's a very different ballgame here. It's organization. 90% of the organizations here are flat organizations. There are barely any hierarchy. So that is kind of something that I like in the work culture. And what is, because it's as I said earlier, it's a extremely decentralized country. So each city has their own agenda, their own vision, their own approach, and that is why projects here vary from city to cities. And it's also kind of what happens with this decentralization. Then it becomes like a mini competition between cities. Who is going to do better in what? So if Amsterdam is doing better in their cycling infrastructure, Rotterdam is trying to do something extremely different. They're trying to green their roofs. That's one of their biggest agenda. That's one of their biggest agendas, let's say. Therefore, what is interesting to work in collaboration with the public sector is that there's a lot of resources and information that is available, and data and whatever, and that kind of helps a lot. And one of the most important point that is quite prevalent here right now is participation. And participation in the sense that not only citizens, like in that is probably one of the elements, but participation in the sense that of sharing knowledge. For example, in my presentation, I showed about this station area of to reach 1 million homes. That publication was made by the railway authorities. They want to, that was their proposal to the national government, so that cities can incorporate that in their vision making. So these kind of private stakeholders also trying to do something for any benefit, for their personal benefit or for the benefit of the good or whatever. But this kind of involvement and participation from different stakeholders is quite prevalent here in the Netherlands. And of course, citizen participation is also very, very important. Otherwise, projects can stall for even 10 years or 15 years if the approval is not there. And what happens is that when the city makes a product, let's say an environmental vision or an area vision, it has to get approved at the council. And the council is something which is above the city as well in their decision making. And the council is formed by residents, they are formed by government officials, and it's not a job as per se, but it's more of a committee that gives the green flag or the red flag for the project. For example, Rotterdam was working on a project, a really massive project of, I think so, 10 billion euros or something for the development of the stadium. Near the stadium area, they wanted some 1,000 new houses. It would create job and everything, and the project was running for 15 years. And then it just got cancelled in the council. So it was a big shame, because process here is because it has become decentralized after 2008. So municipalities and councils have much more power over how they want their cities to be, how they want their public space to be. Yeah.
Right. So you both are practicing urban design in Netherlands, UK for a long time now. Do you find any major differences or similarities about how urban design practice is in India versus in UK and Netherlands? Or are there any differences in the kind of urban design projects? Oh, we can start with Prachi.
Yeah, I can start. So differences, yes, there are differences, and it will always be. It's not to say that one is better than the other, because as Amita was also saying earlier, you're not really comparing apples with apples. They are very different countries. They have, extremely different sort of, whether it's climatic constraints, whether it is, the cultural background, socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's really difficult to compare. But yes, there are differences, and the differences currently, they may range from how politics influences the built environment and design, to the way, for example, corruption is channelized, or to the way work culture is embedded as part of not just by not just by the subjective opinion of an organization or a person, but in law. So there are differences associated with this. Also in relation to how contractual construction contracts and contractual roles and responsibilities are enforced, regulations are enforced, they are all different. So, I mean, obviously I haven't had much experience sort of working and practicing in India. So I probably might not be the right person to sort of say that this works better there or this works better here. There is certainly no one silver bullet of in terms of a solution that UK is perfect at, for instance, which is really different in India. There will never be. But the differences do range around, like, for example, and this is just personal experience from what I hear from friends and other colleagues who work in India, is that, just as an example, for the work-life balance, for instance, it seems, or it so seems to me from the sources I hear, that there is a lot more overtime in India, for instance, for people who join architectural practices as an employee. There might even be exploitation, sort of working over weekends, really long hours, kind of, no strict line between working and sort of, family time, etc. Not to say that that doesn't happen in the UK, it does. Even sort of really internationally reputed practices, you do face this. But if you speak up, then it is enshrined in law that you have a contract and that can be enforced. So people do speak up, they do ask for a better balance, and legally the organization you're working for is answerable to you. So it's just that might be processes are better in place and are better enforced. But well, the second difference would be, like, for example, over here, we have to try really difficult to design, like, for instance, a shared surface where you are sharing space with people and cycles and cars and buses. And I'm just talking about UK, when Rahul comes from, it's like my dream country. And I don't know, somehow the problem is not there. But UK is far behind on such issues. And in India, we see that just happens naturally, whether you want it or you don't want it. The streets are shared by people, cycles, autos, buses, whatever else. So, yeah, there is no sort of clear comparison, I would say. In terms of the second half of the question, which was regarding a sort of level of challenges and sort of type of projects, well, everywhere I think there is a housing crisis in some degree or the other. Everywhere I think, the role of town centers is changing. The role of high streets are changing and needs to be renewed or reinvented. Public realm regeneration is needed. The issue about disused, unused sort of residual spaces between buildings is like everywhere around the globe. Some places tackle it really well. There are really good examples you can learn from, and other places don't. So, yeah, I think there are constants. There is a shared sort of common framework here we are talking about. It's just the way how laws, legal regulations, political will, I think political will is extremely important, and the economic climate eventually informs how all of these things play out and inform you as a professional in order to both win work as well as deliver what is considered as best practice. So yeah, I guess that would be from me.
Is it different in Netherlands, Rahul?
As Prajiti was mentioning, that it's very difficult to compare with India. I don't think there's difficult to compare. But what happens in Netherlands, Prajiti, because you were saying that here the bike paths are like really bike paths, because it's a very small country and it's heavily infrastructure. And what happens, I think so, deal making is a very important issue here that comes here. And what happens is, for example, if the government designated that the station area is going to develop like this and there will be housing here, and I'm one of the landowners, let's say, or the developer here, and then there's a deal there can be a deal. So there are no fixed rules in that sense. In the zoning plan, you can change the zoning plan as a city. If there's a deal is that, okay, then I'm going to give you 50% off in, I don't know, in the when you buy the land, I can give you 50% off. Instead, you have to take care of the public space in front of me, and the public space should be like this. So these kind of constant deal makings happen a lot in the Netherlands, and I think so. If sometimes it helps if you don't have these fixed regulated rules as well. because then you are kind of stuck in a box that I have to, the urban design or the planning process becomes like this. It is tricky what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Just to add to what Rahul is saying, probably try to sum up what both of us are trying to say is actually I'm going to steal Devayan's quote. And Devayan did tell us in one of our previous sessions that West is always not the best. So, and I am a firm believer of that. So there's so much that we can learn from India and the way Indian cities are being planned and have been planned, and the same in the West. And I think what really needs to happen is sort of cross-pollination of the best ideas and collaboration. Because, like, for example, intergenerational living, at least traditionally in India, has been the norm of life. You know, we've all we've lived in, but here, when you it's like a big issue. It's like, oh, we design for intergenerational living. That, so something just happened very easily and naturally in some countries, and in other countries they don't. So it's just a question of what each country can learn from the other.
I also think, for example, when I first came to this country, water is a big issue. 1/3 of the country is underwater, and they designed this polder system and kind of engineered it and made it a kind of a global example. But if I see back in India, in our farmlands, how farmers, they protect their land basically with raising the land up, and you keep dry inside. It's a similar concept, but I think that sometimes it happens is lack of a proper stream of knowledge to channelize that is, I think so. And what we are trying to say here, I guess, is that this collaboration kind of helps to learn more and to see what is the best practice, let's say. So it's very difficult to compare also, I will say, right? But rather to learn from each other.
And how difficult it is to get a job there. Are there any skill sets or languages that are mandatory, like requirements that are mandatory to get a public or a private sector job in these countries? Just like we, heard in Australia, it is easier for students who get degrees locally. Is it the same in Europe?
Here, at least in Netherlands, Europe, yes, language is an issue, I will say. But in Netherlands, language is not an issue if you are applying for a private office. But if you're trying to work in the public sector, then yes, language is an issue. While studying, it's English is the course of study. So there are apart from TU Delft, also there are other very good universities who teach in English. Their course structure is in English, and if the best way to apply for a job, I think so, is via your student. You come to Europe to study, and then that helps you to apply for a job search visa, which is 1 year, and then you need a sponsor. And the sponsor, I think right now, has to sponsor you for 3 years. After that, you can apply for a permanent residence permit or a temporary residence, whatever. But after the job search, you need these 3 years of a sponsor. You need a 3-year sponsor. So in total, I think so, you need to be in the Netherlands for living continuously for 5 years to apply for a citizenship or a permanent residence permit. If you have the permanent residence permit, then of course, then you are free in the labor market. You don't need any sponsor. But if you, I think so, to get a job via being a student is much more easier. And because there are a lot of criteria, salary criteria, and which offices usually don't, they will never go for that route.
Okay. Is it the same in UK?
Yeah, kind of, I think. So I won't labor on the similarities. Yes, just to sum up, ideally, local experience and a local degree will be preferred. I think a lot of, unless you are applying for MNCs that have offices all over the world, that would be an exception. Of course, it'll be very difficult for you to get a job directly in the UK from India without having studied there, without having worked there, without having any kind of permit. Previously, you might be a dependent on your partner, for instance, in order to enter the UK. And then you might try and search for a job that is possible. So you don't necessarily have to study, for instance. There are different routes, whatever suits your life path. But the most popular route that people follow is study and then apply for. Now in the UK, they've reinstated the post-study work visa for 2 years. If you are working in that period, you don't necessarily need a sponsor. But if you do want to carry on beyond the 2-year period, you do need to be working in a practice who can sponsor you with the UK border agency. And you do need to then apply for a new visa called the Tier 2 General Work Visa. First, you can only apply that for 2 years. No, 3 years actually. And then you will have to extend it again for another 2 years. And after you've completed the 5 years of sponsored work visa, then you apply for indefinite leave to remain, which is a residence permit. But that is not citizenship. After you've been on indefinite leave to remain for 1 year, then if you wish, you can apply for a British passport. That is a citizenship, which you have to go through a process of naturalization by just being here for 5 years. It's just all procedural. But you are talking 6 years down the line. So at the very minimum, you would need to be in the UK. If you go down the study then work route, you would need to be in the UK for 6 years before you get your citizenship. At the very maximum, you may need to be there for 8 years if in the 2 years of your post-study work visa, you have not been under Tier 2. So you can swap to Tier 2 quite immediately. You don't have to continue 2 years in the post-study work visa if you do get a sponsored job. So that's not a criteria. So that's kind of in terms of sort of the legality in the current sort of scenario in the UK, I would say, about getting a job. Regarding language requirements, it's all English, so no issues about there. In terms of skill set, I think, well, in the official government records, like for example, the UK border agency records, you won't find a professional discipline called urban design. You will find architects, you will find town planners, and that's probably quite similar to what you heard for Australia, but not urban design. So generally we get categorized under architects when we apply for our visas. But yes, the planning industry and the construction industry do realize the value of urban design in the UK. It is quite well established since 1970s, 60s. Even the local authorities, they do have urban design placemaking departments that look into particular aspects of urban design, whether it be regeneration, new expansion, and so on. So it is a well-established skill set that people do see value in. I think now the political environment of UK is such that I think the environment bill, for example, will be passed very soon in the parliament. And once that happens, the developers and landowners will be legally bound to deliver certain benchmarks when it comes to aspects such as holistic planning, urban design, biodiversity commitments, climate change mitigation, resilience. It has been recognized that all of these benchmarks do require the skill of urban designers. So it is a skill that people do see a lot of value in. It is very competitive in the UK. So there is no dearth of urban designers. So the market is extremely competitive. Yeah, so you do need to sort of like know your stuff, basically.
I'm sure that most of us are inspired to work in Europe.
I would like to just, I would like to add one technical thing to the language thing. After 5 years, when you apply for a permanent residence permit or the citizenship, language is an issue and you need to clear the exam. That's part of the naturalization process. Because I don't think I mentioned that. And yeah, language is an issue in Europe. But in Netherlands, I will say it's much better if I compare with Germany, France, or Italy or Spain, where I think you need to learn the language before your education, I think.
Would you recommend Indian urban designers to work there? Like, are there any good opportunities one could start with? Do you want to go first, Rahul?
Of course, everybody, I think so. Yeah, I would advise, definitely I would advise, but of course it's based on what your focus is or what you want, you know, and but to start with, I think being to start as a student is the best thing, because what happens is that then slowly you get integrated into the cultural system of the country as well. But if you come directly, like one of my friends, his partner is here, and she started working as a landscape architect directly from India now, based on the dependent visa. She's here right now. And what happens is that there's a cultural shock, and it becomes a little bit difficult to integrate, especially because it's a completely different world here. So in that sense, I would suggest, I would still advise that if you want in Europe to work, then I think so application via students is better. Or MNCs before, that also works. If you're working in an MNC, that also works.
Prachi?
I think in terms of recommending, Indian urban designers to work in the UK or suggesting good opportunities one can start with, I think that does boil down to personal choice completely. I think you can make an opportunity, a brilliant opportunity wherever you are, whether it's in India or UK or elsewhere. It just depends on what you really want to do. And should you want to work in the UK or pursue education and professional career in the UK, then yes, there are several avenues that you can pursue in order to, find a suitable university, in order to find a suitable job. There are various agencies in place, such as the RTPI website, the Royal Town and Planning Institute website, the Landscape Institute website, the Urban Design Group website, who do constantly sort of post the vacancies and job opportunities. We used to be able to see that as a student when we were at Brookes University. Even the student unions, whilst at Brookes University, had really good networks with local practices, for instance, as well as more practices located in cities like London, for instance. But this does have a relationship of when you how you choose a university. So if you are choosing or wanting to have a career in the UK, then it is important. Like, for example, you could potentially increase your chances. It will not guarantee you anything, but you could increase your chances by having a deeper research into who teaches on that course. Is that a good mix of professional practitioners with seasoned academics? Because a lot of the times professional practitioners, like I am teaching at Brookes University, we are on the scout of, sort of young, fresh graduates, depending on the timing of the whole thing. If the time is right, because we are teaching the students, we know who to sort of get hold of if you really need someone to help you out on the project. So that is a really sort of good avenue to actually start creating your professional network right from day one in the university. But that does mean that you need to be quite conscious when you select a university and just be smart about it. Like, don't always go by name, for instance. For example, if I just expand on this a little bit. So, for example, and no offense to the university because it's an amazing university, but for example, University College of London, it's an extremely well-known, very well-reputed, very old university. And that does have architectural courses, planning courses, urban design courses, sustainable urbanism courses. On the other hand, you have London School of Architecture, which is a very new university. It only started in 2018 or 2017. Maybe 2016, but it's not even a decade old. And it started from scratch. And the whole model of that university was to enable students to work whilst they study. That is how the university functions. For 2 years, when that university started, London School of Architecture, it did not even have a campus. It used to use city infrastructure, such as town halls, such as larger sort of congregation spaces, such as, for example, redundant, disused warehouses and industrial infrastructure, to actually retrofit in the infrastructure needed to enable learning. So it was almost like a makeshift school, which would change. So when I was teaching in London School of Architecture as well, so we would have our sessions with the students in like pubs, in like cafes, in like, in our own practice. So they would come over because, they didn't have appropriate space. So that is a very different kind of an institution, but it's very well valued within professional circles. And what that does is that does give you so students right from day one are ingrained into professional practice. So they do like 2 days of university, 2 days of practice, or 3 days of university, 2 days of practice, depending on their program that they've selected. However, how does a program like London School of Architecture work for students like students in India, where you have to apply for visa, you do have legal requirements in order to be able to work in the UK? I am not sure. That is something, if you're interested in London School of Architecture, you should Google it. You should write to them and ask them what the procedures might be. If I get any update on that, I can always send the information to INSEA and Debayan, and they can share with the wider group. But yeah, this is just a difference in universities and how you may want to choose.
Yeah, in here as well, there are certain universities like Tilburg University. They also have a similar structure where you work for 3 days, and then the rest of the 2 days is for your course. And even I don't know the application procedure for that kind of a system, but it's interesting that you mentioned, Prachidi, that yeah.
Thank you, Prachi. Thank you, Rahul. It was a pleasure having the two of you. I'm so happy and proud seeing both of you doing so good in UK and Netherlands. Can we open the floor for questions from the audience side now?
Yeah, I agree with, I mean, thank you again, I mean, Sonali, Prachi, Rahul, Amitabh, for, I mean, such a wonderful session where we got so much of information related to, different countries' context. Yeah, I guess, I mean, of course, this is a Q&A session, so we already have certain queries in the chat box. So one is, I think, directly for Rahul. So does TU Delft has any 1-year course, I guess?
Right now, I'm not sure, but that was also one of the criteria when I was applying for my master's, that I go for a 2-year course. And I don't think at that time I saw any 1-year course in TU Delft, but I don't know, things might have changed now. So
Okay.
You just need to check it online in their faculty website.
Right. And the next question is, what is the value of a master's degree from Indian universities in these countries? I mean, I guess it is, of course, like applicable for both the contexts we have discussed today. So anyone can pick up.
Who goes? Or
Go for it, Rahul.
Yeah. I don't know, what do you mean by value in the sense of finding a job, or
yeah, I guess so. Mostly, yeah, it should be that.
As I was talking about one of my friend here, she did not study here, and she graduated from CEPT University, and she's now working in a landscape office here. And I think it is degrees are not that much valued in. I mean, of course, it's valued, but they are not one of the selection criteria in the Netherlands, as far as I have seen in my work process. It's more your work and what knowledge do you bring, and what is really your professional point of view. I think that is very important, because Dutch people are extremely, they are on ground. They are more, I will say, they are more practitioners than in the Netherlands, and they like that. It's a very entrepreneurial country. It's a very business oriented, so they really like that you did something. And yeah, I will say it. So master's degree in the sense that really academic degree, I don't know.
In the UK, it's probably similar. It's not that, if you come here with an Indian master's degree from CEPT, SPA, or any other institution for that matter, that they will, kind of think that that's not valid for whatever reason. That's not true. I think, like, when I came, I had done my architectural graduation in India, the five-year BIASH program. And when I come here, you do get you are a part 2 equivalent in REBA terms, which is the architectural education in the UK. So they have part 1 for 3 years, then they do part 2 for 2 years. So that is like a total of 5 years. So that is why when someone graduates in India, then they automatically become a part 2 equivalent. So when I applied for a job, obviously I did have a master's degree in the UK, but they did look into my bachelor's portfolio, and there was no discrimination of any sort, considering that, you know, it was a portfolio from, you know, a country elsewhere. I think particularly in London, the architectural practices are extremely cosmopolitan. You know, they're just very diverse. You get people from all over the world. And so really it just boils down to how you're able to communicate your design approach, your clarity, your work ethics, for example, and your passion for the profession, really, and for the subject eventually. So, yeah.
Thank you. I guess, so I can see Ujan sir here, and he has shared a few questions earlier. But sir, if you would like to ask that now, I mean, it's the right time, I guess, if you are here.
Divan, actually I'm in a car.
Okay.
I also did not hear the entire event, just bits and pieces. And my queries earlier may have been already addressed, but those questions were mainly based on what we teach here and our concern. And when you people go and work, I'm not talking about studying, after doing a urban design course in an Indian university, when you go and work in another country, there, how much, I mean, how do you find the knowledge you have gained here in your academics is useful, or do you find in any way wanting that? In other words, I'm simply asking, would you suggest anything, you guys who are working abroad, that how we can improve or include or exclude even things from our academics to make you people more appropriate? Not that it's the main goal of our teaching here to how to make you guys appropriate for other countries. In fact, for me, it is otherwise. I don't feel very good when our brilliant guys like you go out and help other countries to make their places better. So that way, I'm not that happy. But still, that was my key question, actually.
Sure.
If anyone wants to respond to that, I'll be happy to hear that.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So yeah, I guess again, Rahul, Prachi, Gunali, I'm sure all three of you would have points to add. So yeah, please.
I can start on this one. Thank you, Ujan sir. That's a really, really good question. In terms of, I think, and sort of my suggestion would be, and I don't think it's about the case of making someone appropriate for other country. I think that would make someone appropriate even for practicing in India. So in one line, it would probably be just better integration of practice with theory. For instance, like currently in our 5-year curriculum, obviously if a student wants, they can be doing summer internships, etc. in their holidays, but formally, the 6-month internship is probably the only professional exposure they get. Also probably a better, more consistent, I mean, I haven't been in, within the Indian academic scene for a long time. So I'm probably talking about the experience I've had more than a decade ago. So just forgive me if things are not the way they are, things are not the way they were then. But at that point, a better balance of having practitioners, like real practitioners who are running their own business, an architectural firm, teaching or leading a course module, not just coming in for crits or one-off dissertation crit or final crit, but actually teaching the course module. I think that would have been really helpful. Yeah, I think, yeah. And I think the other thing of making things more appropriate would just be, because design solutions will probably be very specific and unique to every place because the constraints change, but the process and the rigor that you use to develop that design solution, I think the intellectual thinking that goes behind it, and the steps that we get taught as part of a 5-year education, I think is extremely useful. I found that to be really useful when I came here to study in the UK. So yeah, you always have to unlearn and relearn some stuff wherever new place you go to. So.
Okay, thank you. Of course, the question was not exactly when you do undergraduate and go for postgraduate. It was almost like, it was like when you do a postgraduate here, but go to work there, not for studying. Many of you have studied. Many of you have studied and working there, but there are people after studying here, like perhaps Insia. I don't know whether she's Insia or not. Nicely wrapped up. I think it is Insia, and so they have studied here. So I'm asking them that working there, studying here and working there, whether that's the issue I'm talking about. Otherwise, if you have done a post graduation there, you are already into that culture,
Interestingly, sorry, I don't want to take all of the time, but I'll be really quick with one comment. So because I teach at Oxford Brookes University, the Masters in Urban Design program, and the module leader, they are really aware that, a lot of students may actually go back to their countries to work. So how do you make the course relevant for those students? So that what they've said. And one of the things that we did to change the course structure was actually to introduce an international module. So if the course has 2 semesters and it's a 1-year course in the UK, then in the second semester, once they've got the basic grounding and the principles of urban design, in the second semester, the site that is chosen for their design module is an international site. So generally students can choose a site in their own country, or they work in groups and they mutually agree. But what that helps is, because there are multiple groups, they do choose multiple sites. I'm really sorry for that plane.
No, that's a very good idea to have a international studio. I mean, most foreign universities do that to learn for the rest of the world. I think what do they? I went to Penn, and we had a thing too from Southeast Asia studio. And I don't know whether in India, whether SPA and all the other big universities can run a studio which is based on international kind of a site and their issues. That might make us a little more, aware of what is happening in the rest of the world. But we have to also get some faculty. But nowadays, having all this online thing all geared up, I think that can be taken care of, getting inputs from outside. So that's a very good suggestion. I think people like Arunab and all are hearing this, can think of. And the other thing I wanted to tell you that already in our universities, most in the postgraduate urban design, most of the senior teachers are actually practicing teachers. So that's one thing good. At SPA, at least all the studio people are full-time practicing people coming in. So anyway, I think that answered my question. That's one good suggestion was that to do may not be a full semester, but maybe a half a semester, a project from another culture and technology or whatever. Yeah, thank you.
And I would like to add to this discussion, Udan sir, because particularly the thing you wanted to ask, like, after studying in SPA, when people go out and how they find. So of course, me and Insia, I think we actually did postgraduates. Did our masters in SPA. So we are more, we have that experience here. So I can tell from my end, like quickly, definitely whatever I have learned from SPA was always valid and relevant across, again, the world, because like the way Prachi also mentioned, the process and how we are dealing with these things, that like the solutions might be different, but the process is more or less similar. So it's definitely relevant. But then one thing, I would definitely say that because outside India, especially in the UK, when I did my second master's, I saw, because urban design is not a field where only the architects can do it. Like, so there are a lot of people who are also part of urban design courses who are coming from non-design backgrounds. So that interdisciplinary nature of learning urban design, which I felt when I was studying in UCL, was really something different, because there are people who cannot have that skill set of translating certain ideas into physicalities, the spaces, but then still they are doing urban design. So in terms of like, through other modes of it, like institutional designs or like certain kind of mechanism design, stuff like that. So it's a very different experience of how people who are not sort of coming from that background can also contribute in this field, whereas SPA was of course fully like having people from all architects and like well-known architects, they are teaching us, and then the students are all from architecture background. So that was a very, very different way of doing things, where spatial interventions were never the final outcome, which was kind of they were looking for. So this I have found very, very different. But apart from that, I feel, I mean, of course, like without SPA, I know that I would not be here. Definitely. I mean, it's not biased, but yeah, I have sent different universities and things, so I can definitely I'm proud of it. That I'm proud of. I was part of SPA.
I did want to add that from an Australian perspective, or just universities as well, because I've spoken to a few of my friends who are in doing similar programs in the United States. They always want to learn from the East. They want to learn how that informality happens, how are people, using the streets. So there's definitely that opportunity for collaboration, because a lot of universities can have exchange, even if it's India just hosting students from abroad. Because I did a travel studio to Manila and was doing a research of understanding global South informalities of trading and transport. And during that during that visit, we tied up with University of Philippines and had a lot of internal collaboration and learned about their way of planning processes. What are the urban codes that they sort of help design or unpack? And that gives you a lot of insight into what is their planning system and how urban design fits in there. So that opportunity also exists for, SPA or other universities in India to sort of touch on.
Okay, thank you. That's
just
good.
another way, another means of actually, just making the cohort more resilient, so as to say, particularly in the master's course, is maybe exploring the possibility of like a summer winter school. So like an exchange, a more collaborative approach with international universities. So like, for example, at Oxford Brookes University, we collaborated with CEPT about a couple of years ago as part of the summer winter school program, where the students, whoever chose to be on that particular course, they came here obviously on tourist visas, and I'm not sure how the expenses are worked out their end. And it was, they were here for about 2 weeks or so. And what we did was, there was a structured course that was delivered, and sort of including site visits, field trips, and students actually then, critiquing, preparing the materials that were required in the form of deliverables as an output of that course. So, but having done that as part of their masters, what happens is that if they are, due to any situation or circumstances, applying for a job elsewhere, and say, for example, if it would have been UK, then that's a really nice coincidence, because they will be able to show that experience of being able to analyze an area within an urban area within the UK context, and so on. So that's, that could be another way, but it obviously has its financial implications.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, we are anyways quite late, not following our schedule. So sorry for that, the delay. But I guess, Arnav sir, if you would like to conclude the session today, I would request you.
Yes, thank you. But I thought that you were anyway running late.
Right, but it's fine.
Risk me getting into this picture right now.
No,
So,
you are always welcome.
Anyway, thank you so much.
We're up for it.
We are. I was just hoping that there are many things that one would have liked to ask, not only from this panel, not only to you or to everybody else, but the real fact that global IUDI is now really becoming global, because we are now, what Prachi just said, we are now starting to exchange, right? Ideas, thoughts, mechanisms, all of that, which I think is making IUDI become the representative of a strong urban design program in this country and abroad. So that's the first thing. I had a few specific things to ask, but I don't know whether Amitav is still there. He did mention at one time that, or heard it wrong or whatever, that he was still surprised that I'm hanging around in SPA, right? Or he's still surprised that SPA is hanging around even if I'm there, right? So the fact is that SPA and me have been hanging around, and so has Ujan sir and Sanjay sir, right? Who have taught me, but they have been hanging around in urban design department and in SPA, and that's what has given me the momentum to want to be around. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I have constantly been asking myself, as a generic, for a generic discussion like this, it's a chicken and egg discussion anyway, but someday we'll have to get to the brass tacks of it. Will the academia, influence the profession or the other way around? Right? That it is a chicken and egg discussion. There is already a decision made that the profession or the professional will say what should be taught in academia, right? It could also be possible that the academia discusses what needs to be taught and the profession follows suit. And one of the reasons why IUDI Global can really play a very strong role is with people like Rahul and Prachi and all of the others, right? Who are saying that, look, the academia in Netherlands is different from the academia in UK. And therefore, the profession there is doing something which we may want to learn from. And to me, that's a very important dimension of a program like this, right? I also got very enthused when I heard Prachi saying, we are rewriting a book, right? Which is taken 12 years already. And it may take even further. We don't know how much. But that book that she is rewriting, or the one that she was looking at, is the same book that I learned urban design from, right? Myself. And it was called Responsive Environments then. And today Prachi is showing the same cover, right? Today, Prachi is also writing another book. And that book, like it has been with the international situation, is called Eco-Responsive Environments, right? Like everything is anyway eco nowadays. So urban design is also going to be eco. Responsive Environments as a book is going to be eco. And that is what we are going to learn more from that book. Now, it's so important for me to understand that someone from India going abroad, understanding the Bible of urban design, and then wanting to rewrite it is being given a chance. And that is happening. And sooner or later, one day we will get that book back and we will use that as our Bible again, or as a textbook again. And I know that Professor Ghosh and Professor Kanwende would agree to this, because they are the ones who give that book to people like us. And whatever was our response at that time, the fact remains that there is a second version of that book that will come. And Prachi, please go ahead and write that book quickly so that we can do something with it before we retire. Right?
Well, after 12 years, it's coming to an end.
It's nice.
We should submit the manuscript in a month's
Yes, thank
time.
you so much.
No, I mean, it was really heartening to know that, responsive environments, it was a Bible for us when I studied as well, urban design. And and for the new book, we were working with Ian Bentley and Sue McGlynn, who were like two of the lead authors of the original responsive environment. So I've just learned so much, and
exactly.
I still learn with them.
And that's why I was also in the passing mentioning right at the end after this program, like you've conducted, Devayan, and you will be conducting again further, that, can there be a book of a similar nature, which would be about Indian cities and Indian urbanism, right?
Actually, to be very honest, we have been discussing this.
I'm sure you have. I'm actually saying that you know what to do, right? You're also from India. You have a experience of making urban design become a book for academia, and that is where I seem to be coming in, right? Or someone like me seems to be coming in, and that's so relevant today. If you make a book like this, we have been thinking about it a lot ourselves, that there are a lot in India going, which can be a part of that book, right? Or subsequent books. And once this book becomes regional in nature, it sort of looks at different kinds of possibilities. We will be able to know about, first of all, the regions, and then know about urban design a bit more. So there are some great takeaways from sessions like this, which I've been very quiet about. I learned a lot. Thank you, Deban, for it, Prachi, as well as Gunail and Amitav, wherever he is. But these are all very nice lessons for us. In fact, what Gunail you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, was Amitav, while you were speaking, was that Sydney was more of an object city with architecture as one of the learning points, or Melbourne was a city where more of urban design happened, right? Now, I've been to both these cities. There are friends in both of these cities. I know what to ask them for some time, right? So I think that these are very significant questions that have been raised. They need answers, and please come together and make us help us all in answering them. Thank you, all of you. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. And again, thank you to all the panelists, and of course, Akanksha and Insia, for being with us today and making it successful. And we will be again hosting another session in November. Thank you, and good night, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My video for a little while. Sorry. See you. Thank you.